Well, 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 it's about that time. Darktide's dropping on September 13th, but the marketing cycle's spinning up just now, and the reveals are looking like they might be a steady flow over the next few months. And yes, as this splash page already quite clearly indicates, Psykers are indeed in Darktide. Alex Wiltshire from Edge Magazine has the scoop, so we'll be recapping the major points from the reveal today, and working in what we know about gameplay, concept art, and the overarching narrative that will soon see the deep, dark, dastardly things festering on this corrupted planet's surface come to light. Light that will likely come in the form of superheated lasers and force swords that can decapitate a Chaos Ogre in a single blow. For the uninitiated, Darktide is a 40k first-person shooter set in the hive city of Atoma Prime on the planet of Tertium, which has been overrun by a chaos cult infestation and a horde of poxwalkers known as the Admonition. They are blessed and cursed by the chaos god Nurgle, which means much of what we face down in the depths of the hive will be bloated, diseased, gangrenous, and downright foul in every capacity imaginable. Think a mix of Left 4 Dead and Vermintide, set in the 41st millennium of Warhammer, with chainswords, plasma weaponry, bolters, and parging in holy fire. Essentially guts, glory, and the god emperor of mankind. It's gonna be a good show. The characters you see here are not going to be like Vermintide's, and that they are not set in stone. If concept art and screenshots are any indication, you can now custom create how each of them look, down to their gender, skin color, and scarring. So the Asian Zealot with the bowl cut is just one of many possibilities when it comes to forging your own playable homie. The full extent of options has not yet been revealed, but considering the mohawked white girl we've seen in every other trailer so far doesn't even show up on this cover art of the main characters of the game, my guess is that system will be quite extensive. Which is to say, Mohawk Sergeant may have never been a named character in the first place. She's one possibility of many hundreds, thousands of permutations, which is something a lot of players are going to love no matter who they are or where they're from. Being able to self-insert a little bit can make you feel a closer bond with the character, so a robust creation system will be attractive for a bunch of newcomers to the series. I'm just curious what exactly that will mean for banter and character development, because we grew to love the friends in Vermintide, and it's a simpler thing to flesh them out when you have a set voice actor and story arc tied to each one. We're being told this dialogue system will be much more complex in Darktide, and will be the vehicle through which much of the story is told, as the individual classes interact with each other, discuss the missions, how they relate to their homelands, and their current predicament as Penal Legion troopers sent in as effectively a meat shield death squad for the Imperium. Apparently, it's even more expansive and complicated than Vermintide's conversation framework, which was pretty complex in and of itself, with 75,000 voice lines already written, which sounds like a big number, but frankly, I don't really know what that means. I feel like there's a decent chance these characters won't be as personable or lovable as the ones in Vermintide, because custom avatars rarely are. The one thing I can say about that is, if not having characters set in stone, like a Marcus Kruber or Carillion, means that it becomes easier to add new classes in the future, like an Admech Tech Priest or a Squat from the Leagues of Votann, that could very much be worth it. If we end up losing some of that heartfelt banter and witty writing, that would suck, but I think it might be a worthy trade overall if it means more unique content. However, if we lose that banter and don't really gain anything in return, then I'd argue that's a problem. So then the question becomes, how does character customization tie into the specializations in Darktide? Well, there are still 4 confirmed playable classes, but they're not the ones we initially thought they were based on the trailers. The Veteran, the Ogre, and the Zealot will all be making an appearance, of course, but the Psyker is the 4th, which seems to explicitly deconfirm my Squat and Leagues of Votann theory, at least for now, but instead we'll have a character built off the foundation from Sienna in Vermintide 2, similar to how the Ogre is an inversion of Barton's perspective and how he towers over the opposition. Now when it comes to the Psyker, they can pop heads using their warp powers, but will be subject to the same overheat mechanic as Battle Wizard, given a new name called the Perils of the Warp. Essentially, if you cast too much too quickly, you explode. Fortunately, it doesn't sound like you'll be turning into a Chaos Spawn, which is maybe a missed opportunity, but there you go. So balancing your venting and your magic damage output with melee combat will be key to survival when playing as a Psyker, and that's really going to be the crux of much of Darktide's core gameplay loop, no matter which class you are. That balance between ranged and melee is a core element of how Vermintide works, and it's going to be the same in Darktide. Because while a 40k shooter will obviously focus quite a bit more on shooting, melee is still at the core of what this series is. And if I know anything about Fat Shark, it's that their level design, enemy design, and the frequency of pickups will dictate how often you can use your ranged weapons. Which is to say, you're probably going to be somewhat limited on the higher difficulties. They're going to make you scrap and fight and claw for every inch of ground, every medkit, and every bag of ammo. And attrition, being worn down over time, will very much be a factor. It'll be a run-ending situation in a lot of scenarios. Still going to be way more shooting in this title than Vermintide. That was always kind of a given, but they are still going to heavily encourage use of your melee weapon, and melee is, of course, a natural part of 40k as well. That's good. Melee is something Fat Shark does really well. It's always been a satisfying element of this series. Now for the Psyker, I'm hoping we're not looking at just a copy-paste of Sienna's stats from Vermintide 2, and that we'll have a wide array of force powers to choose from. Smite being a lightning spell that Deathwing handled quite well, Pyrokinesis to explode people from within, force pushes to send enemies flying. Those kinds of powers would go a long way to differentiate the Psyker from previous titles. And the same can be said for the Ogryn, whose pushes and melee attacks should be much more impactful than a regular human's. We know he towers over enemies, but I want to see that imposing physicality have real gameplay implications, and that brute force be brought to bear in terms of his melee prowess. When it comes to kit and abilities, the Zealot can start a fight with their flamethrower, purging the Chaos Taint in Holy Flame before charging into close quarters, bowling over enemies and locking them down, forcing them to use their melee weapons while they smash hordes apart with their Thunder Hammer. And the Ogryn can unleash with its Ripper Gun, an automatic fletchet shotgun that can clear an entire hallway in seconds, smearing cultists into paste. If we take a look at the Chaos Reaper Ogryn, wielding an arsenal of all kinds of heavy weapons here, and concepts art of a melee variant wielding different kinds of spiked mauls, pickaxes, and warped shields, we get an idea of what our own Ogryn might be able to bring to the battlefield. And I'm still desperately hoping for some Chair Knight claws in this game. Let us roleplay as a swollen, stupid, yet utterly lovable Wolverine. Tearing through a horde with Chair Knight claws would be one of the most goddamn satisfying things I could possibly imagine in a game like Darktide. So far, I'd imagine large chunks of each class's arsenal have not yet been revealed, and the wider that arsenal is, the happier your boy's gonna be. The veteran will be able to wield a lasgun or plasma weaponry, equipping them with scopes, sights, and other attachments, and their special ability lets them zoom in further, reducing spread and increasing headshot and weak spot damage. So this class is likely to be the best fighter from range, used for sniping enemy specials and chaos squads before they can become a problem. Each weapon will have its own special unique ability as well that modifies its properties, similar to how the secondary fire mode on Victor Saltzpyre's repeater pistol works. We've actually seen this in action for the chainsword already, which is revved up in earlier trailers and then bites down through armor and helmets, dealing massive single target damage at the cost of cleave. The plasma gun can be charged up for a massively powerful shot that can explode most enemies, but risks overheating the weapon, and the las guns and auto guns can twin link their flashlights, and the Thunder Hammer can power up to deliver a devastating kinetic strike that blasts everything in an area of effect. There's even an auto pistol knife combo that allows the player to fire in CQB while engaging in melee, similar to how Saltzpyre's sidearm and rapier works. Now, one interesting thing to note about the class setup here is the fact that 2 veterans were shown off in every single gameplay trailer since launch, and the fact that you're no longer playing named characters leads me to believe that you can mix and match your team compositions, running 2, 3, or even 4 veterans if you so wish, which would of course also fix the problem of the 5th character in Vermintide, where if you join late, you'd be forced into playing a character you might not want to, or maybe didn't have any experience playing. I imagine there might be some downsides to running 4 Psykers in a single squad, as each class is specialized in certain ways, but the ability to experiment with team comps should add yet another dynamic to gameplay that will already be quite a bit more complex than previous games in the series due to the heavier focus on ranged combat. With that in mind, enemy squads of Corrupted Guardsmen will work alongside specials to take you down from range, while Poxwalker hordes of Nurgle zombies will try to chop you up in CQB. These squads of enemy troopers will move dynamically, taking cover when under fire, moving tactically along catwalks to flank you and gain a good vantage point from which to engage. To keep that from getting too frustrating, and answering one of my biggest concerns with the game, each character has an overshield that will absorb a certain amount of damage from enemy guns, recharging more efficiently the closer you are to teammates. This is presumably Fat Shark's way of mitigating the annoyance of being tagged by a bunch of guardsmen wielding lasguns from really far away, especially when they're in large numbers. Either you give them Stormtrooper aim, where they can't hit the broadside of a barn, or you give players a way to cut down on that random, unavoidable damage that would certainly accrue over the course of a mission. And a small personal overshield, hand-waved as armor for the vet, psychic powers for the Psyker, faith for the zealot, and brutish toughness for the Ogryn, seems a pretty smart way to avoid the pitfalls of annoying old units like Ungor archers, who were incredibly annoying when they first came out in Winds of Magic DLC for Vermintide 2. A problem that could easily multiply tenfold when you're getting swarmed by hyper-accurate Las troopers perched high in the rafters of Atoma Prime. Still remains to be seen how enemy range fire will be balanced, especially on higher difficulties, but as we've discussed, you'll have plenty of firepower to shoot back as well, and now you've got an overshield that will protect you from at least some of that incoming fire. Of course, the real threat in games like this comes from the combination of enemies, and the hordes and range squads will put pressure on you, but the specials and bosses are usually what deliver the killing blow. The special enemies confirmed thus far are Chaos Ogryns with heavy ranged weapons like Stubbers or Reaper cannons, Hounds of Zaphin, which will likely function exactly like gutter runners, jumping on an ally and pinning them in place until they're killed, Prometheum flamethrowers, presumably for area denial and damage over time, bombardiers that throw explosive grenades, long-range snipers, and a heavily mutated abhuman that looks a lot like a charger from Left 4 Dead and will likely function just like one too. Basically, one gimp arm and one massively swole one, juiced up on all kinds of chemical stimulants and neurgal goodness, ready to bowl you over and disable all your teammates. On top of all those, there are melee-only Ogryns, some heavily armored and helmeted ones with two-handed shock weaponry, and others that can use a shield to block incoming fire and give ranged squads more cover to pin down your team. It's clear that many of these are being plucked directly from Vermintide and Left 4 Dead, and frankly, I don't have a problem with it at all. These are special enemy types that simply work. They are proven, and they are satisfying to fight and kill, and they can separate your team and absolutely wreck you if you are not careful, and that spawn director really decides to screw you over good. Put a nice 40k skin and spin on them, and I'm more than happy with how that will function. Bosses are presumably being kept under wraps for now. We know of the Plague Ogryn and have seen screenshots of that, but otherwise, there's not really been too much info forthcoming. The Plague Ogryn itself looks absolutely vile, I love it, but I'm obviously hoping for a ton more variety here as well. There are almost limitless options to choose from, but I personally would love to see a Wounded Plague Marine or an otherwise bolterless Death Guard trader make it in some capacity, whether it be an endgame boss or just as mini bosses. I think that could work great. I know people like to jerk off to the utter impossibility of killing a Space Marine, but the reality is this is a video game, rule of cool prevails, and of course, a kill team consisting of an Ogryn, a Psyker, and a Stormtrooper with plasma weaponry would absolutely have the ability to bring down a melee-focused Death Guard trader, especially if he didn't have his bolter, or he was wounded, or there was some other mitigating factor that allowed you to just, try to escape from him. Some kind of cameo from that would be sick. Fight with them would obviously not be easy. It should be a fight for your life, but I think it'd be a really nice addition to the game. And frankly, I'd be a bit shocked if there was zero demonic presence in Darktide as well. Summoning demons from the warp is kind of what Chaos Cults do, and at least a few Plague Bearers, or hell, even a cameo appearance from a Great Unclean One, would be an epic sight to behold. We're also being promised a much deeper and dynamic storyline and a different approach to building levels that will help Fatshark create new missions and content much more quickly after launch, which will ideally avoid those significant downtimes with nothing new to sink our teeth into. I know some people don't love the phrase live service, but I'm always of the mind that if the core gameplay is great, I want more of it. More guns, more maps, more classes, more bosses, more content, and I can see this shaping up to be a really epic title and one of the few 40k shooters that lives up to the legacy of its lore. There are some absolutely epic screenshots and a lot of details in the full magazine spread from Edge, so please do consider buying a copy to support their work and so you can read that full article at your own leisure, but so far, I am very impressed with what I've seen and heard from Darktide. We've got custom characters and team compositions, custom weapon loadouts with attachments, special weapon abilities with lots of gore and chunky goodness, and I am absolutely loving the enemy designs, the details about how they move and interact with the player, the spooky gothic environments that seem to get worse and more corrupted the deeper you go into the hive, and that brutal, visceral mix of melee and ranged combat. It just sounds like the perfect recipe for a satisfying gameplay loop that will keep players coming back for months or even years. What I'm hoping is that I will be able to bring you guys exclusive gameplay quite soon. I don't have any details on that at the moment, but the second real gameplay is shown, I will be right there to cover it and give my thoughts and impressions on everything we've seen. I am super excited for this game. I've been looking forward to it for a really long time, and I think it will be a staple of the channel for years to come. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know how you feel Darktide is shaping up so far, and I'll see you all in the next one. Indie Pride, signing off for now. Have a good one, guys.